funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, red, yellow, green. The state takes a cautious step forward out of the latest stay-at-home order. Plus,
I love New Mexico. I love the idea of returning. This is not a retirement. This is just a new chapter.
We talk with outgoing U.S. Senator Tom Udall about his environmental legacy and what might be next for him. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. Well, the Thanksgiving holiday is over, and now we wait for the new case counts and the possibility of reopenings. The governor has a new plan for attacking the spread of COVID, one that's more locally focused, and of course depends on all of us to make it work. We'll also talk about two more uplifting topics, the rise of women in politics and encouraging economic news, with perhaps signs of more. Here's the line. Our state has gone from being one of the nation's best at preventing COVID spread to one of its worst. Trying to get some buy-in from a more adventurous public, New Mexico has unveiled a three-tiered red to green system that will allow reopenings by county based on case prevalence and positivity rate. The governor spent time on Monday explaining how the new system will hopefully work. Here to talk it out is our Line Opinion panel. I'd like to welcome guest panelist Dave Mulryan, founder of Everybody Votes, just coming off his crazy busy season. Two of our line regulars are also with us this week. One of them is Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group PR, and the other is attorney Sophie Martin. Thank you both for being here. Sophie, I want to start with you. What do you make of the starting of the reopenings right after Thanksgiving? Was this some strategy at work here?
Well, I mean, I think the shutdown before Thanksgiving made a lot of sense in that it gave people at least some time to rethink their Thanksgiving plans. But not so much time that they sort of forget that that's something that you need to do. But there is a lot of pressure in our communities to have the ability to, get our lives done. And so I think that this is an acknowledgement of that. But it's also, my sense is that it's an attempt to put in place incentives for communities to take the precautions that the governor has been asking us to take. That there have been periods where there's been more enforcement, less enforcement. But at this point, it seems to me that communities need to be looking within the community saying, who's doing this right, who isn't? What can we do as a community, again, as a region or a county, to reduce the numbers for our citizens?
That's a good point, Dave Mulryan, that Sophie just made. The ball's back in the courts of the local folks.
Right.
It's a very interesting strategy. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's an interesting strategy, but I think it's also sort of an offshoot of, I think it is fair to say that we've had a failure at the federal level to really guide what we should be doing for this COVID epidemic. And, it has been pushed down to the state level. The governors are, trying a whole array of different types of things. Some of it seems to work. I mean, New York State seems to have done very well, although they suddenly seem to have a surge. And I think that one of the things is that, the founders said when the federal government fails, we'll push democracy to the states. And we're seeing that. Yet you have to wonder, can a state itself, bring in these incentives? And it's one that's based on, what red, green, and blue. And it sort of reminds me of when we were having the terror alerts, the same sort of idea. Yet we know what to do. People should wear masks. People should avoid large gatherings. And yet people seem reluctant to do that. And of course, now we've politicized it. Somehow not wearing a mask means that you're a red person and wearing a mask means you're blue. It is insane what's going on. And I think that the governor is, I wouldn't want to be the governor. I wouldn't want to have to make these decisions. But in one way, I agree that her strategy is smart because she's pushing it down to the lowest level, the county and even the mayors, and saying, look, here is a way for you to bring back everything by getting your caseload as low as you can. The question is it going to work? I mean, we have no idea, and we'll just have to wait and see. Time will tell. And meanwhile, we are out of hospital beds all over the state and all over the country. It's just kind of outrageous when you think about it.
Tom, looking back, the idea of family gatherings is now, pretty much understood to be the main culprit for how COVID has spread. And, we just came off a big Thanksgiving Day weekend. A lot of folks traveled. and they came back, and the governor was asking them to, quarantine and all kinds of other things. What is your sense of what are you hearing about travel particularly and how people approached it? I mean, a lot of folks went on planes this past weekend.
Yeah, travel was something that a lot of folks are starting to do again, some by airplane, other by car. I think that the timing, to Sophie's point from earlier, that the timing of these announcements is orchestrated to really discourage people from traveling. Mm-hmm. I know that people, that there were a lot of folks who traveled and a lot of folks who got together in smaller groups to celebrate Thanksgiving, a lot more connecting by way of the internet through the different video devices to connect with family. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody is, really kind of pitching into the level that they feel like that they've been impacted by the virus. I think that the red, yellow, green approach that the governor has created is good. It provides a path for different counties. There's also a lot of ambiguity. Mm-hmm. Two items that I just briefly want to talk about. Please. One is the who's in control at the county level, like in Bernalillo County. Is it Bernalillo County that's in control of enforcing or setting more criteria, or is it the city of Albuquerque? In Roswell, is it Roswell or Chaves County? So a lot of ambiguity there as far as what real power these local municipalities have. And then the second is the red, yellow, green timeline is every other week. And, here we are, we're in the process of getting daily updates on number of infections, numbers of deaths, but we have to wait 14 days to find out if a county is able to come off of the red into the yellow or to the yellow to the green. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a flaw in the system that they really need to address. I mean, they have the quick accountability. Why not apply it and reward counties or punish them accordingly if they aren't able to maintain those certain levels?
Sophie, please pick up on that. Tom makes an interesting point. I mean, on Wednesday, we had two looks at the county-by-county map. Los mm-hmm. Alamos lost its yellow status, and they're now red, of course, and San Miguel is now yellow, but that's as we tape this. But as Tom mentioned, it's going to be another 2 weeks before we get more county updates. How can folks, run businesses, plan events, I'm
going to give you the opposite of that,
Please.
Right?
Okay.
Which is friends who are business owners, and so of course this is entirely anecdotal off of Facebook and other social media. Mm-hmm. One of the things that they have talked about struggling with is the lack of predictability. This 2-week period at least gives both residents and businesses this kind of like, okay, so we at least have 2 weeks to work with to plan. It's not every day there could be a change, every 3 or 5 days or whatever it is. We have this horizon where, for instance, restaurants can say, well, we anticipate we're going to be this way for 2 weeks. We can make plans about staffing and purchasing. Mm-hmm. Parents can say, okay, for 2 weeks, we're not in full lockdown, we're in red, so I can make plans for this next 2 weeks, as opposed to having that kind of whipsaw situation, which I think in many ways might be more challenging.
Meaning if going yellow, red day by day is worse than...
I think so.
I see your point.
Yeah.
Dave, pick up on that as well. It's a challenge. Sean makes a good point here, and Sophie amplified it. It's a very difficult challenge to make planning work. And how is there a better way?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure there's a better way. All I can tell you is that I, for example, stayed closed because, you don't want to get the reputation for like, oh, I went to this place and I got COVID. Mm-hmm. That to me seems very destructive to whatever brand or business you have long term. But I was lucky in that I didn't have a huge staff, so, I could plan that way. But I think that what Sophie is pointing out, the uncertainty. We are trying to fly a 747 with no radar. We're in the clouds. There's a mountain ahead of us. We don't know. It's like Airport 75, And so I think that, the governor and the politicians, I mean, really, who do we listen to? I mean, do we listen to the mayor? Does the mayor of Roswell tell us, like, what they're doing? Does the mayor of Albuquerque tell us? I think that the delineation of who is in power and authority here is unclear, and they should clear that up. And again, it goes back to very basic things that Tom and I both work for. What is communicating? How are you communicating, and what is it that you are communicating? Mm-hmm. Because people tend to follow when they have a good leader. I'm just not sure we're getting the leadership that we need, and it's very unclear.
What's missing in your view in the leadership? right now?
I think what's missing is a clear strategy. I think that, people seem to be fumbling around a bit, and, the red, yellow, green is okay, but like all of the points that we just made, how do we decide, if you're a restaurant order, how do you order food if you don't know what's coming up for 2 weeks? I mean, and when you look at like a couple of Walmarts were closed, and I was thinking, how much perishables do they have to get rid of when you start doing that kind of thing? So, I mean, again, the unknown knowns, to quote the great Donald Rumsfeld, are what's killing everyone.
Wow. I was not quite ready for that person being quoted. But
Airport 75, Donald Rumsfeld.
I mean, quite a combination of references.
Well done. Let's talk about vaccines here real quick. Tom, I'll start with you. We've got a hearing next week, I believe, next Friday in the U.S. in the Moderna vaccine has its FDA hearing. The UK is pressing ahead quickly. The psychology of the vaccine, what's your sense of how people are taking this? Meaning it's potential side effects, fear, all those things. Is that being managed in your view as you see this rollout starting to happen?
Well, it's being managed. Whether it's being managed well is a whole other discussion.
Good point.
To Dave's point from earlier, we trust those who are closest to us. So, you have the feds who are basically managing this approval process for vaccines. Mm-hmm. We have at least 3 different vaccines that I've been keeping track of. So all of a sudden it becomes a branding, issue. Do you like product X or product Y, and what does your local governor or your local mayor or your local congressperson has to say about that? So I think that there's a lot of room for improvement of just going through the process of what was tested, how were these tested, what are the side effects, and if you have transparency, you'll have people build trust a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And I just don't see a whole lot of transparency. I see a lot of product, but not a lot of insight as far as how they got from point A to point B.
Yeah. Sophie, it's going to be a tough one. I mean, a lot of folks are out there publicly saying they're just not going to take it. They don't trust these kind of things at all.
Allow me to say now on New Mexico PBS that I join the 3 former presidents in saying that if somebody wants to broadcast me getting my COVID vaccine on TV, I'm in.
Right.
Yeah.
We have seen over the last couple of decades an increase in the U.S. in vaccination. So I'll delicately call it uncertainty. People who have followed, unfortunately, in a number of cases, some very bad science in this area. We've seen an increase in dangerous diseases that we thought that we had overcome because of that hesitancy. And this is going to be a big thing for us. I mean, we have states and the federal government really thinking about, does this become mandatory? School systems are having to think about, do we make this a mandatory vaccination situation? It is a minefield. But at the same time now we have people who are saying, no, but I want it. How quickly can I get it?
Right.
And I think that tension there, we hope to get some resolution in that question relatively soon. That decision is largely up to the states, although the CDC has obviously some input into it as well. Here in New Mexico, the expectation is that health workers will start.
Exactly right. Plus, factor in we have a transition in regimes, it's all going to make it more complicated. Yeah. We're out of time on COVID right now. Tom Udall is next, and then this group is back to talk women in politics.
And, we also have a history of female political leadership in this state.
That's right.
And I think that this, there's kind of an old saw about how you need to see someone who looks like you in that position in order to think I can have that position. And I think my hope is that we've reached the tipping point there.
This week, outgoing U.S. Senator Tom Udall is in touch with correspondent Laura Paskus about climate change and the environment, 2 issues the New Mexico senator has spent much of his career working on. Addressing rumors that the Biden administration was considering him for the Secretary of Interior position, Mr. Udall also talks about that agency, which his father, Stuart Udall, led during the Kennedy and Johnson presidencies.
Senator Udall, thank you so much for being with us today. You have been such a leader on environmental and climate issues over the years. So we wanted to check in with you at the end of the Trump administration, looking ahead to the Biden administration. Of all of the policies that the Trump administration has enacted or rolled back over the last 4 years, which do you think will have the longest term or most serious impacts on New Mexico's waters, landscapes, and communities?
You bet. Well, that's a excellent question, and the thing people should know and understand is we face a really, really serious climate crisis, global warming, and it's extraordinarily difficult and tough. One of the things I know that's changed just since I've been in the Congress is people are seeing this around them in their daily lives, whether it's extreme events, weather events, drought, a number of kinds of impacts are being felt, and people can look around and say, that's the climate. That's the change in the climate. So knowing that we have that big issue, the thing we need to know is that the United States needs to be at the table with other countries around the world. After the Paris Agreement in the Obama administration, we really had stepped up to the plate. We had some great goals. We withdrew from that agreement under President Trump. We had a very strong administrative clean power plan out of the Environmental Protection Agency. That has been dismantled. There was a really strong, wonderful agreement on CAFE standards. Those are the automobile mileage standards. It was up to 54 miles a gallon they were going for, the auto companies, and we're going to do even better. So we had, and there were many other things that were appliance regulations and standards and some very strong things moving us in the right direction. One of the things also that I pushed for was a renewable electricity standard, which has been adopted in almost 30 states in the United States. So take all that progress and then imagine the Trump administration, the Secretary of Interior, the EPA director, taking a wrecking ball to all of that. That's where we are. And it's really unfortunate to me that we've seen that step back, especially when you have the Chinese and the Indians and the other really big countries staying at the table, determining the rules. And the reason they do that is they want to get the economic benefits. We all know that a green, clean energy economy is all about jobs of the future. And those jobs are growing dramatically compared to some of the other jobs in the energy area. And it's really important for the United States of America to be a part in that economic growth. So what I see happening in this new administration coming in is really getting back to the table and reversing all the things that set us back. And then we have a new proposal called 30 by 30, saving 30% of the land and waters by 2030, which is a part of the Biden-Harris plank. It's in the Democratic platform. I've been working on that for almost a year with groups all over the West to make sure that people felt that this was something they could do at the local level. It could be done at the state level and also at the federal level and make a real contribution on climate, on the extinction crisis, and on saving nature.
So one of the things that I think people are a little bit concerned about is there will be legal challenges to lots of these actions by the Trump administration, but the courts are so full of Trump-era judges and nominees. Are you concerned about that at all? How will the courts hold up against these challenges?
Yeah, I am concerned about that, but in the climate area, there has already been a court ruling. The crucial finding, the absolute crucial finding here is that carbon pollution is a threat to public health. And that is a ruling under the Clean Air Act. This was done by judges who were in all sorts of Democrat and Republican administrations. So that sets the groundwork to move forward under the Clean Air Act and to really move us to tackling climate change and global warming.
So we've known about climate change for 6 decades now, and we just lost another 4 years. You mentioned the 30 by 30 proposal. What else does the Biden administration need to jump on immediately in January?
I don't think there's any doubt they need to rejoin the Paris Agreement. The meetings that take place before the big annual 5-year meetings, we need to be at the table, so we need to get a Secretary of State approved who can start getting people within the State Department up and running to get out there and participate in those meetings. I think we have to restore the targets in terms of getting better and better mileage with gasoline in our automobiles. And I think you're going to see the Biden administration really push electric cars. I think that's one way that people can really make a contribution, is buying an electric car. And you know, many people now are actually putting solar panels on their roof and then charging their car. So that's a car driven by the sun rather than by being driven by fossil fuels and non-renewable fuels.
So there's lots of speculation about the Biden administration, and your name has come up repeatedly as a possible Secretary of the Interior. I know you want to come home to New Mexico, but can you address those rumors at all?
Oh, sure. I know that my name is in on the list, the top list that is there. I haven't been really in that much contact with them, but I would be honored to serve in a Biden administration. I don't know who wouldn't be honored to serve in the cabinet when you have the kind of experience in terms of public lands and dealing with climate change and the extinction crisis. All are what you're a big part of Interior. But I've known Joe Biden. I've known his family for a long time. I campaigned for him in 1972. I worked in his office before I went to law school in 1973. I've stayed in touch with him ever since. He's been a real mentor to me. And so I just want to do what's right by Joe and by Kamala. If they need my help, I'm happy to weigh in and be a part of their administration. As you said, though, I love New Mexico. I love the idea of returning. This is not a retirement. This is just a new chapter in my public service. And so I hope to be doing many things in New Mexico and working on Native American issues, on climate issues, on conservation, on even working on moving the bills, some of which haven't passed yet, that I've been working on, like the protection of the Gila River with wild and scenic protection, which I think you know a lot about.
So certainly you definitely have been a leader on environmental and tribal issues. I'm curious also if there are any lessons you might have learned from your father, Stuart Udall, about what makes a good Secretary of the Interior and why that service is important.
Yeah. Well, he was a visionary, my father, and he combined the big vision with doing. And a good example of that is I remember when he was Secretary of Interior, he flew over in a Bureau of Reclamation, the dam building, and he was with the director of the Bureau of Reclamation, and he pointed out they were flying over southern Utah, and Floyd Dominy said, "That's where the next big dam's going to be built. It's going to be a really good one, Stuart." My father looked down and saw these towering spires and beautiful country, and he said that should be a new national park. And he went back and helped create Canyonlands National Park, which has been a real success. When it was kicked off as a new national park, people came from all over the world. It's had a big economic impact in the local communities, and that's the kind of vision he had. And then on top of that, he was a doer. The other thing that was really terrific in his administration is how do you get the land and the waters protected, and how do you create a fund to do that? And so he was at the creation of the Land and Water Conservation Fund to take revenues from offshore oil and commit it to a renewable, long-lasting program where parks and recreation areas and a variety of other areas could be preserved for future generations. So that was pretty amazing. And we, this year, following in that tradition, put in permanent full funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So every year from now on, there will be dedicated $900 million to conservation and the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So I'm very excited about that. In addition, that was called the Great American Outdoors Act. Another provision of that dealt with backlogs in the maintenance at the national parks. And so what happened there is we put in $10 billion to make sure that we start dealing with the backlogs on the maintenance at the national parks. In a sense, we're kind of loving those national parks to death. We need to get that infrastructure up so we can protect the parks and so there can be a great visitor experience.
And so as I understand it, Secretary Bernhardt, the current Interior Secretary, did not nominate projects for funding this year. Is that right? And can that be rectified, or what is the problem there?
Well, I think that the Secretary's been very slow to move on this. He only has, I think, a couple of months left. And the Biden administration, I would assume, is going to take the direction of Congress and move out and use the Land and Water Conservation Fund. But never forget, half of that fund over its history, and I'm sure that will be in the future more or less, is about 50% of those funds are spent at the local level, cities and counties, at the state level. So if they have an opportunity to create a park, do a recreation area, expand a park that they already have, they can apply to the federal government and get a matching grant so that they can move forward with that. And I would just challenge anybody, if you go into some local park that you look at the plaque and you'll see half the money was probably from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And if you talk to the local people, that wouldn't have been created unless you had that matching situation and both local dollars and federal dollars were used to create that park or recreation area.
Okay. So I'm curious if you have any advice for soon-to-be Senator Ben Ray Lujan, especially in thinking about protecting New Mexico's land and waters.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Ben Ray Lujan, first of all, he ran a great race. He is now senator for New Mexico. I will walk him down the line. He's senator-elect, really, but I'll walk him down the aisle and over to be sworn in on January 3rd. That's the tradition in the Senate. And he, I think, is going to represent the state very well. He's been in the House of Representatives for 12 years. Before that, he was on the Public Regulation Commission. He's smart, he's talented, he's very capable, and he's been dealing with these conservation, renewable energy, broad issues that deal with parks and public lands and wild and scenic rivers for a long time. So I think he's going to be great on the conservation front. But the first big task that this incoming administration and the new Senate is going to face is getting the economy back in shape and getting the pandemic under control. And we need to do the economy part safely. So we want people to go back to work, no doubt about it. But we want them to do it safely so they don't come home, bring the pandemic, and their grandparents or somebody in their family is injured by that. And we're at a devastating level of the pandemic right now in New Mexico and across the country. There's hardly a state that's escaping this big spike that we're seeing. So I know that's going to be Ben Ray's dedication, is to work on economic development, on making sure we have a strong economy, putting people back to work, and keeping this pandemic under control. And one of the interesting things, Laura, that I think is happening here is people are finding that the tension and the anxiety and all of that caused by the pandemic is relieved some to get into the outdoors, to get into the parks and the recreation areas and have a little solitude and enjoyment and socially distance and be with a few family members, not in big groups, but much smaller groups. And as we know, being outdoors is much safer, especially in this winter period and at all periods, than indoors and cramped up where all of that air is contained, and it's more difficult and it's a little more toxic in that situation.
Senator, thank you so much for your time and for your service to New Mexico. We're all very interested to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the next chapter.
Good. Thank you.
New Mexico's incoming House of Representatives will be mostly women. And the new president pro tem of the state Senate is Mimi Stewart, who replaces Mary Kay Papen, as a matter of fact. And on the national stage, Republican women showed strong gains among their party in the U.S. House, and President Joe Biden has nominated Janet Yellen for Secretary of the Treasury and appointed an all-female communications staff. Pretty cool there. Dave, step in on any of that, but we'd love to hear what you think is behind the rise, particularly of Republican women. Let's start there.
Well, I was really looking at those numbers, and I'm thinking, when you look at the idea of a Republican women. Now, this is an opinion, and here it comes. I think that Republican women, in some ways, the reason they did so well in gaining all those seats in the House of Representatives, Republicans do not automatically say, you're a woman, we're going to have you run. In some ways, they make you fight for it, and they're kind of harsh. And, I think that, Republicans have said, they don't automatically just say, well, you're a woman, run for this seat. Women have had to fight for it to get there with Republicans. And I think, in a way, it's like muscle. It had to be built up, and it built up, and somehow it broke. The question is a Republican woman a good candidate? Is she going to be a good politician? We're going to find out. I mean, there's no question. But I thought it was really fascinating that Republican women were the number one beneficiary of whatever it was that happened to the electorate in this election.
Right. It is fascinating. We'll have to circle back on that in future times and talk and kind of tease that out.
Yes.
Sophie, interestingly, and let's bring it closer to home, the numbers for New Mexico, it's the House, it's really kind of startling when you think about it. The kind of advantage that women, it's wonderful.
Women are in the majority in the House. We already had the past president pro tem of the Senate was a woman, Mary Kay Papen, and now, we will have a woman in that leadership role again. But I think that part of the picture in terms of women in politics in New Mexico can really be ascribed to groups like Emerge New Mexico, who have made a concerted effort and brought funding and expertise into bear to help women develop their candidacies, to develop the skills they need to successfully run. And we also have a history of female political leadership in this state.
That's right.
And I think that this there's kind of an old saw about how you need to see someone who looks like you in that position in order to think I can have that position. And I think my hope is that we've reached the tipping point there.
Interesting point. Tom, you know Mimi Stewart well. You've worked with her. You've known her a long. Senate Pro Tem is no small thing, and she's really earned it when you really think about it. What's your prediction about the coattail effect, perhaps, with her ascension?
Well, I think it's great. Obviously, the vote will need to still be made.
That's true. Good
before
point there.
the legislative session occurs and stuff. But definitely, she has the trust and the faith of the Democratic caucus, and she's a very she has worked for the position, and she has done a fantastic job to secure the position because she has the respect of her colleagues. And I think, when we look at respect in general, I think that's really will determine, how your gender plays into your role in leadership is what kind of respect do you show to others. And so I think Mimi is going to do great. I think if she's elected, which I think she will be, I'm not trying to say that she's not, but when you look at just the prominence of the female women candidates and the entire New Mexico congressional delegation is
right.
all female,
That's
and
right.
so that's fantastic. So it's not what I'd like to see is that this all of a sudden doesn't become a trend, and we focus more on hey, this is great. We're all just voting for candidates now, because there's a lot of fantastic, strong women who are in leadership positions, and I think we're going to benefit as a result.
So,
Can I jump in on that?
please,
Oh,
yeah, I wanted to get to you right out there. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out too, though, that there's been a shift. The shift that we see in Washington definitely goes beyond this communications team. I mean, I've got to say, no slight to the women on this team and to women in public relations. I worked in communications for many years, but public relations and communications have been seen traditionally as female jobs. There's even a sort of an old it's called the pink ghetto of public relations, where it's often dominated by women. But what I think is more telling about the Biden administration and the decisions that it's making, 53% of their senior transition staff are women, and that comes very close to reflecting the percentage of women in our population overall. 52% of all of that transition team, all that transition staff is women. More than half of the government agency review team is women, and we have women moving into, or at least, that'll be nominated for really important positions in national security with ambassadorships. At the Treasury, Janet Yellen is expected to take on that role, and other senior roles in the White House. And when we look at other countries, and we see that there are some countries that say, half of our legislators have to be women, or half of our board members, corporate board members, have to be women. Well, the U.S. hasn't done that. But here we have an administration that is really, I think, putting teeth behind its allyship and showing, we can put 53% of women on this team. Why wouldn't we?
Good point there. Dave, is there something that you have seen that there is a key to recruiting women for office that both parties have started to use? It's a little early days, but is there something you're grokking that seems to be the trend?
I think I sort of am pretty clear about how I feel about this. I believe the best politician tends to win the slot, and the question that I keep thinking is, are these women going to change the institutions that they've been elected to or appointed to, or are the institutions going to change these women? And we're going to find out. But I think New Mexico has a very long history of you stand up and run and, you can win. I mean, Stephanie Garcia Richards, but I also think we need to credit people like Mrs. Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi. She has been a great politician. The fact that she's a woman, I'm guessing, has had some impact. Yet she's been effective, male or female, no matter how you look at it. And I kept thinking too about Geraldine Ferraro when she ran for vice president in 1984. That was a real trailblazer, and all of this has had an impact. And people like Shirley Chisholm and Barbara Jordan. I mean, these women did it when no one was doing it. And, and so you really have to go back and give them some credit, too, that they were willing to take a lot of abuse, really, was what it came down to stand up and run. And they did it. And, but I think that Sophie's point about emerge, I mean, nothing, it can't hurt, right, when you say to women, like, let's, get up and run. And I think we should be doing the same thing for a lot of Hispanic potential candidates and Black politicians. Nobody can stand up and say, I'm a politician, I'm going to run for office. There's a lot of gears to keep it going, to get a logo, to start a campaign, to start fundraising. And, all of these are learnable skills, but you have to have someone that's willing to teach them to you.
That's a good point there. Tom, interestingly, when you think about it, it's this entire rainbow of how women see the world, to put it frankly. Just like men, that once an assumed office is held, there's the possibility to have that woman's lived experience come through in her policy decisions and how she, the approaches a woman wants to take on the things that are important to her. And Sophie, of course, I want you to pick up on this as well. But starting with Tom, could we anticipate that policy changes and how things are approached could have a serious change here when these numbers start to turn like this?
Oh, absolutely. Because what happens is when you have shifts. To Dave's point, as far as if it's an ethnic or a gender representation, you're going to have a shift in perspective, and that's going to impact the kind of legislation that's brought to the table, and it brings an opportunity for things that might not have been given some serious consideration because you have a new perspective. So. I think that's the value that we have for New Mexico's and as well as for our country is whenever we increase the number of perspectives, I think that we increase the ability to have government literally represent more people.
Good point there. Sophie, your thought on that?
Hard to argue with that. I mean, I think that Tom makes an excellent point that the increase in diversity is going to lead to an increase in perspectives, obviously, in our government. In the more immediate term, though, the two dynamics that come together is the Democratic political power in this state, the fact that Mary Kay Papen is no longer in office, and the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think one bill that got held up last year, that has been held up in the past, that is, I think, almost guaranteed to pass at this point, would be the repeal of New Mexico's anti-abortion statute, because you can no longer say, oh well, Roe v. Wade holds back that tide, and you have both a political party and representing that political party a group of people who either are or have been impacted by those policies, the nationwide and attempts to limit abortion rights.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think that's one big area that you're going to see. But the Democrats have also brought up issues involving early childhood education again. There's hope that issue will be able to move forward. And I expect, if nothing else, I expect an awful lot of coverage about what are the ladies doing now? Is this a ladies' issue?
Yes.
And to the extent that it's good government, oh my goodness, you go.
Interesting point there. That's right. Hey, Dave, when you think about it, though, a 37 to 33 female to male advantage in our legislative House side, that's a block, as they say. You can move a lot of things forward with that kind of advantage.
Right, but I think we have to let's not lose our perspective here. The number one issue that this legislative body is going to be facing is the crisis in the economy, and that isn't male or female, and really we are facing a disaster in terms of who's going to get money, where are they going to get it, how are we going to prevent these evictions. I'm not sure that's a male-female divide. That's a divide of the people who have money versus the people who don't have money.
But Dave, there is a male-female divide that has been noted, and it's an economic divide where women at a much higher rate are having to drop out of the workforce to take advantage.
But and also, we can look and we can see, will these women say, women are traditionally still underpaid. I think it's now 73 cents on the dollar. So if we can move those things to the forefront, I think that benefits everyone. There's no question that we need to do it. But the number one issue that's going to be facing this legislature, male, female, in between, is going to be how are we going to salvage this economy and make sure that we don't have a wave of evictions and we have people going broke, because that's going to be the number one thing. And if women are better at that, then good, because, boy, we need it. There's no question about it.
Good thoughts from everyone there. We're taking a quick break, and then we're back talking good news about the economy. New Mexico in Focus is on Twitter and Facebook. Follow us online to get updates on upcoming shows and tell us what you think about the top news stories of the week. Then tune in because we may share your comments on the line. Encouraging economic news. That's fun to say. Check this out. Netflix plans an even bigger investment in New Mexico, $1 billion over a decade, with the promise of thousands of new jobs at the expanded Albuquerque studios at Mesa del Sol. The city is also a finalist for the U.S. Military Space Command, and a new training unit for the Air Force is moving to Kirtland. Tom, let's start with Netflix. Big news. What's your sense of the Netflix deal and how it positions us for the future?
Well, the Netflix deal was huge when it was announced, several years ago. It made waves throughout the United States in the industry, and then the head of the Film Commission and Economic Development was Alicia Keys, and now she's the Secretary of Economic Development, and there's a lot of momentum there in the film industry as a result. So it is a really fantastic move for New Mexico. I know the film industry gets knocked quite a bit as far as incentives go, but you know what? They bring the money. And
let me ask you real quick though. State and city giving up a lot of money, closing funds, floating industrial revenue bonds. Is it worth the investment? I'm curious your take on that.
I would say so, and by means of disclosure, we do some work in the economic development arena, and so they are getting a lot of incentives through, and I don't know all the specifics of them, but consider this: that over the last 2 years, New Mexico has seen 30 different deals generate $1.2 billion worth of private investment. Now, how do you get beyond, I don't know what type of incentives there are, but I can tell you it's not more than $1 billion. Right. And that's a lot of real cash that's been coming into the state as a result of, economic development efforts here.
Good point there. Dave, let me go to what I mentioned, the U.S. Space Command. I'm particularly excited about this. I'm looking to talk with Sherman McCorkle here in the next week or so about this and the plans to kind of get Albuquerque seated here. When you think about Kirtland, White Sands, AFRL, Air Force Research Lab, it feels like we're the perfect fit. Does it? Am I misreading this?
No, no, absolutely. I think we're the perfect fit because what all of these things share in common is you have a workforce that needs to be versed in space and planes and Air Force technology. We have that. We have had that since the end of World War II. I think that it's a brilliant plan to bring these things in. These are good jobs. They're solid. Maybe we're a bit of a beltway bandit, as they call us, but these are great jobs. But it also, don't forget, New Mexico, we birthed the atom bomb. And, and I think we never shied away from what we were doing here. And, one of the things you can say, I don't know if it's been our congressional delegation, if it's been Democrats or Republicans, but we have had a very long and I think a very fruitful relationship with the federal government. I think that, one of the signs is that they trust New Mexico with their projects. For whatever reason, they send them here. We do a good job on them, and it's great. It is good, stable jobs. It is good, stable funding. It's great. The only little thing that I would say about it is I hope that when the politicians and when the people who are bringing these projects look, they keep downtown in mind. Can we put something as a incentive for us to get the revenue bonds or whatever we have to do? Like, let's put some of your back office workers downtown because, boy, downtown looks like it's been hit by a neutron bomb. The people are gone and the buildings are all standing. And we need to really encourage some sort of workforce that gets put downtown, if that could be part of the deal.
Sophie, Virgin Galactic, remember those guys? Interestingly, they're set to start doing commercial flights next year, but in addition, they won a NASA contract to test equipment and material on some of the flights. Has their ship come in? Is this now the moment?
Well, from your lips to God's ears, as they say, certainly that's been a long wait for New Mexico to see the benefits of that program. And, even when it came together, it was a bit of a, no pun intended, but maybe a bit of a moonshot. So I think that we are right to be cautious. Let's not break out the bubbly yet. But it's not a quick business, right? It's good to see some progress here.
That's right. Hey, Tom, interestingly, talking about this space stuff with Dave, I forgot to mention Orion. Orion Center campus plan near Kirtland Air Force Base. This is interesting. Could house 1,000 jobs when opened, expanded to as many as 2,500. The campus would include a 2 million square foot manufacturing center, 8-story office building and lab building, an extended stay hotel, and a whole lot of other developments as well. That's interesting. What's your sense of that one?
Oh yeah, and it takes up the what used to be a portion of a runway of the Albuquerque Sunport.
That's right.
So it's using space that's available. I think the Sunport Business Park approach is smart. And that type of development can really complement what's already there. And what is there includes, Kirtland Air Force Base. You have the Air Force Research Laboratory. And those are within close proximity of where the Orion operation is being proposed. So you have a lot of these key pieces that are really falling into place with respect to the Space Command. To Dave's point earlier when he was talking about New Mexico being where the atom bomb was created, New Mexico has had also a number of other firsts, including the nicotine patch was developed through New Mexico Tech. You also had Microsoft had their very first days here before Bill Gates got called home by Dad. But so you have a lot of technology, a lot of firsts in the state. You also have more research that's available through the state universities than any other part in the western United States. I mean, it's the type of investment that you would typically see that's only reserved for those research universities in the Northeast United States. So New Mexico has a lot of positive things that are going for it. But the things that need to change in order for it to keep moving forward, the education system, the workforce, those are the two Achilles heels right now for economic development.
Right. Sophie, when you think about it, it's interesting. You can see the trend. It's all about looking up in the sky. It's about space at this point. It's very interesting. But these are very good paying jobs. I mean, just as a counter, Amazon is building a fulfillment center on the west side. It's going to have 1,000 full-time employees. That's no small thing. It's not quite the same, but my point is you have to have jobs available for everyone up and down the ladder, so to speak, from the very educated down to less so.
Yeah,
Is that what gives you a little bit of comfort here?
Well, I think that your point is right on. There was a period where it seemed like all we were really able to recruit here was call centers, and those, come and go. But when we see an investment in infrastructure, when we see an investment in workforce, all of that is helpful, and it helps to build political support for these ideas. I mean, when you look at the film industry, the film and television industry here, the folks who started out saying, I don't necessarily have the training yet, but I want to get it and I want to get involved in that industry, are now seasoned professionals who are able to advocate for their industry in New Mexico. And that progression has been really important for that industry. Certainly, government workers have been able to advocate through, through our governor and things like that. We see those things. But I think back to the number of times, Gene, you and I think Tom have talked about the importance of diversification. And we've always, we've said, yes, we need to diversify beyond oil and gas. We need to diversify beyond government work. And the state is doing that. And as those industries become entrenched, it's important that we not then neglect the industries. We want to keep the three-legged stool balanced, essentially. And so programs like this help to show that our community is still able to compete in these very important areas.
Dave, it's interesting. Deals go on, don't they? No matter what's going on in the world, global pandemics. I mean, money still wants somewhere to go. So
the other thing that I think that we should do is sort of a bigger picture look at all of this. One of the people that I know who was tangentially involved in the Netflix thing said one of the big appeals of bringing Netflix to New Mexico on such a large scale is that the people who work in the movie industry beyond the bottom line, or the bottom line workers, which means they don't have profit participation, they can afford to buy housing. They can afford to have a good house in New Mexico, which that is no small thing. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about Albuquerque, but we should expand that. We should include the rural areas too. When you look at where they are out there at Casa del Sol, it's a quick hop to get over to Estancia and down to Los Lunas. And we should make sure, we've got Facebook, we've got Google, we've got Netflix. All of those people need good housing, and Albuquerque and Bernalillo County should share and encourage people to go to the rural areas, because we cannot go on with this rural-urban divide.
Good point.
Gene,
please don't.
If I could just add in, there are two items that really provide that local control for economic development. One is LEDA, the other is JTIP. And both are funded through the legislature. And they're both so critical to really incentivizing and providing a reason for business to locate in New Mexico. And so, to Sophie's point, as far as really diversifying the economy, from away from oil and gas. You really need, that's one of the ways you can do that is with JTIP and LEDA funds and providing the incentives to companies to be here, but not giving away the bank. Just saying, hey, we're glad that you're here. Here's how we can help with your workforce. And so those are some of the positive things that we're doing, I think, in New Mexico to really see that move away from oil and gas.
Momentum is an interesting thing, isn't it? It really is. That'll do it for The Line this week. We appreciate all you guys, all your panelists keeping abreast of the news this week. It's been fast moving. Be sure to follow us on YouTube to catch all the extra content we can't fit in the show. There's a lot of it. As you heard in our first segment, Governor Lujan Grisham had toggled the public orders. We are all now working and living under the same guidelines. It also means we can get after some desperately needed shopping for the holidays. Now, after the season of home delivery, and look, it's easy to fall into the charms of tablet convenience connected to a large online retailer. It's going to take a bit more work, but work we must for our locally owned retailers. There's a Facebook meme getting a lot of deserved traction that gets right to the heart of it. It states, where you spend your holiday dollars between November 27th and December 31st, 2020 will determine whether you have a Main Street in 2021. The meme actually finishes with, it's that simple, shop local. Hey, be it Central or Coors, Paseo del Pueblo in Taos or California Street in Socorro, online or in person, whatever Main Street means to you, it's that simple. Shop local. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.